Hey, Audrey, how was Wittgenstein?
Talking to me?
Yeah.
I don't know which Audrey you're talking to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
You were in Wittgenstein's group, right?
Yes.
You were there this afternoon?
Yes.
Oh, I couldn't get in for some reason.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have, I didn't get the link.
You know, sometimes I find that the link works on my iPhone, and then for some reason I have to send it to my email to put it in. And then I can open my email and then connect on my what do you call this, desktop, which I only use for certain Zoom meetings.
I may have to try that. I'll try that next time.
But it was very interesting, and we went to 85.
Oh, okay.
So you should read from 79 to 85.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, I think I'm going to think that things should be coming a little clearer now from last week. As we go along, I think this will get a lot clearer what's going on here. Wow. Yep, a lot of people. Hopefully, anyway, as we keep going, Matt's lectures are going to get a lot clearer.
What do you mean? What's going to get a lot clearer?
Let me put. I'm sorry, Audrey. What?
What do you mean? It's going to get a lot clearer? Oh, you mean Heidegger? Really?
Well, that's the hope, anyway. You know, it's just when you approach Heidegger, and everybody says this, it's just, yeah, he's one of the toughest, isn't he? He's in terms of difficulty, I guess, yeah, he's 10 out of 10. So as you heard Matt say, yeah, you're probably not going to get it first time around. Very, very few people do. And that's no shame in that. It's gonna take a while. So just at the very beginning, do the reading, listen to the lecture, just let it wash over you, and bits and pieces will probably come. The jigsaw puzzle pieces should come together. Hopefully, anyway. Still got more people coming in.
Well, maybe when everybody gets here, you can explain a little bit about your notes, because I go to the pages in my Being in Time, and I don't find what you're talking about. And I'm wondering if it's related to the lecture and you're reading another book.
The notes are the notes are Matt's. They're not mine. They are connected to the lecture. I just thought they were helpful to go as you listen to the lecture.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I was looking for those pages in my Being in Time.
Yeah.
And the book you copied is not the verbatim Being in Time. It's a book called Existentialism.
It's a book.
Oh, that's what I missed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, James.
So if you coordinate, beginnings and ending sentences, you could probably correspond them to your copy of Being in Time, if that's what you're doing. I don't think it would be too difficult. But yeah, this is from the Existentialism textbook that we used all the way back when this class was 6 years ago. I don't expect anybody to have the textbook, which is why I try to give the scan in the PDF. It's a little confusing.
So is the section on existentialism in Being in Time
No.
pretty much related to what you're talking about in the book Existentialism?
Yeah, the only thing you have to worry about is the page numbers.
Okay.
The page numbers aren't going to be, they're going to be what they are in the textbook, Existentialism, which has no relationship whatsoever to the copy of Being in Time you may have. So,
okay.
So in other words, don't worry about it.
But his ideas on existentialism, how it relates to his being in time, is
Right.
similar.
Right. You'll just have to pay attention to
Sure.
where the beginning sentences is and the ending sentences is. Anyway. So the idea here, if I've got, okay, here we go. So the idea here, I've got it listed up. Where am I? Or does anybody have any reactions to this week's lecture? I think it was a little clearer because the last time we ended, I said we were going to cover Denken. I got the spelling wrong, Denken, and you were. I think it was James. I think you were asking, what the heck are you talking about? What? I don't understand. What? I've studied Heidegger before. I never heard this. Well, now you heard the lecture, so yeah. Denken. I don't do the German accent. So the idea there, Heidegger, my understanding is, yeah, it's German for thinking. It's the translation for thinking, but that's an imprecise translation. It's not just thinking. It's about questioning, cutting to the core of the essence of whatever it is you're dealing with. It's not just thinking. It's questioning the very foundations of your field, your study, your preconceptions of a subject, anything, or even reality itself. That's what you're doing when you're doing Denken. You're not just thinking about something. You're really drilling deep, digging deep into the dirt, as it were. So that's my understanding of it. He covered that, I think, pretty fairly in the lecture. Yeah, I agree. These lectures are great. Matt's a great explainer. He really just lays it out for you with a minimum of jargon, just the amount you need in a way that anybody can understand. These really are great. We've been doing these series for a while, my friends and I, and this was the next one up. So I thought, let's share it with everybody else in these meetup groups. So, yeah, any reactions from anybody?
I found a little bit difficult to kind of like locate the center of the lecture. Although if you just want to concentrate on thinking, I did look in my index for thinking. And that is the translation of Denken. It is, or Denke, you know, that is the verb for think, to think. So I looked up that in the being in time, and I didn't quite get through all the references. I guess I had a busy week. But I did sort of like come to a few conclusions by kind of like centering on those passages of like how thinking centers Dasein on the there. So the critical thing is the being centered on the there-ness of the there, or the there-ness of being in the world, or the there-ness of the being. So I thought that's a really good kind of psychological crutch. In other words, when you're thinking about something and you want to find the authentic horizon of what you're thinking about, make sure you're concentrating on the there. So that's the situation. That's the situational awareness of existentialism.
Yeah. It's certainly not the everyday thinking that we all do, the everyday cognition, but yeah, I think Heidegger would say the more deeply you consider things, the better off we are. The more you ask questions and try to cut to the really the heart of Well, it's a matter of taking it to the next step. It's taking it to the next level. You are thrown into this reality here, but to make a long story short, things are falling apart here. It's hard to make that argument that things are not. We're living in a condition where all of our understanding of social society and civilization, environment, technology, are going catastrophically wrong. If you're going to get anywhere to solve any of these problems, certainly Heidegger was saying we can't use our conventional thought processes on these matters. We're going to have to reconsider these foundational concepts of what we're doing here. Things like technology, things like civilization. Heidegger would suggest that it's baked into the system. I think Matt says it at one point. The things that we would say are going wrong, are unavoidable. The way of living we have right now is necessarily leading us towards these civilizational disasters, and for the most part, people are just not even aware of this. We're sleepwalking toward toward ruin. And if philosophy has a job, it would be to wake us up to these larger issues. So Heidegger's prescription would be the first thing you got to do is ask these difficult questions. The foundations of how we've constructed things. That's the impression I got from the lecture, certainly.
Is that related to the existential way of thinking? Is that free from the subject-object duality, where he says that the existential a priori of seeing the world as a readiness at hand, as opposed to presence at hand, as opposed to the scientific way of looking at objects.
I kind of think I have a quotation here. One of the things that I noticed in my readings this week was how much he was trying to refute Descartes and Kant. He was very busy in these sections that reference thinking in attacking the positions of Descartes and Kant. And here's one of the passages after he he does actually say something positive here. He says Kant grasps the phenomenal content of the I correctly in the expression I think, or if the relation of the practical person to intelligence is also considered in the expression I act. In Kant's sense, saying, I must be conceived as saying I think. Kant attempts to establish the phenomenal content of the I as res cogitans. That's the thinking body. If he then calls this, or the faculty of thinking, if he then calls this I a logical subject, that's quote, logical subject, unquote, that does not mean that the I in general is a concept gained merely by logical means. So he's saying this is we usually thinking logically when we separate subject and object, but Heidegger is giving him the benefit of the doubt and saying that this is not necessarily an operation of logic when Kant says logical subject. Rather, I'm quoting again, rather the I is the subject of logical behavior, of binding together. The I think means I bind together. All binding together is an I bind together, quote, I bind together, unquote. In any taking together and relating, the I always already underlies, and there's a Greek word which I don't remember how to pronounce, venon or something like that. Sorry, noinon. Oh, it's iponoinon. No, all understanding, I think. Thus, the subject is consciousness in itself. Or I'm sorry, the subject is, quote, consciousness in itself, unquote, not a representation, but rather the form of representation. This means that the I think is not something represented, but the formal structure of representing as such. So he's kind of taking Kant's seriousness and trying to build on it, saying that the I think is actually the form of representing that we use in consciousness.
Okay, I could follow that.
And there's this relationship when he's saying to think, he means we bind.
Yeah, yeah.
He's clarifying that.
Yeah, what I would get out of that is the idea that self is a very active process. It's not something that just passively exists. You know, the only time you could truly be qualified to say to possess a self is during the act of thinking or during an activity in that sense. Self is a verb. Self is something that is actively happening through the course of time. As all things, I think Heidegger would say all things are that are being exist through a dimension of time. So it's a very different way of viewing the world. It's certainly a very different way of viewing the self. If you do have that perception of self, how do you move through?
So to answer the question, you can actually call it subjective. He says it's okay for Kant to call it subjective formalism or whatever he says there, but it is the point is that we're thinking of the all. We're really thinking of we're thinking of something much more serious than thinking about our subjectivism.
Okay, yeah.
It's a relationship with the world.
Yes, that's right.
It's a relationship.
It's our relationship with the world that's at stake, and there's a plan he puts together for how you can achieve a completely free and creative relationship through yourself. Right.
So, because Heidegger talks about the usefulness, how the world as an instrument that you use, and that's your relationship with the world that is beyond the, subject-object duality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more than that, more than a subject-object duality.
I'd like to chime in if I could.
Okay.
I'm new to this group. I don't know protocol. And I'm also new to Heidegger. But I'm just enthralled by what I came across the last, I wasn't able to join the last group. And I'm glad I'm not catching names, Kant and Descartes brought in. I think what's very intriguing is they're bringing up the idea of the Cartesian agent. You guys are talking about the self. And in that lecture, they spoke of seeing it as something to be utilized as tools, resources, the value in an object, right? And you've also just brought in the idea of the acting self is even from a neuroscience standpoint is being identified as a process. All the stimuli come in together, and that creates an observation, and we act on that as a body, as a person. However, the idea that there is a standalone self, an agent, as Descartes would put, that has some sort of permanence that continues on through time, is I think based on even going back to, as in this lecture, Plato and Aristotle and the Socratic method, right, which has huge value. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't employ that Socratic method. But it seems to me what Heidegger, and I'm really turned on by this guy, he's challenging, saying, okay, that's useful, but I think, Dave, as you were opening up, we're heading in an inevitable path, inevitable because of the constructs that have been developed through time by these, this Socratic method and this identity of self. And so Heidegger is saying, well, in order to change the path, we need to go back and look at our assumptions. And he brings up the pre-Socratic. He even, I think in the previous lecture, he says there was the attraction from the those exposed to Eastern viewpoints, right? And in fact, this idea of a self as a process comes into Eastern viewpoints, from everything from Buddhism to Zen. And the idea of time just relates to impermanence. So, things come into being, as you guys are pointing out, through the essence of, call it consciousness, you stumble on words, but it's experiential, right? We want to incorporate the idea that this is a matter of experience. When Kant, Descartes, I think, therefore I am, I think I would personally look, the way I look at what he was trying to say is, I experience. I have a first person subjective experience. Therefore, that is the one thing that I know. I know nothing beyond that, right? So, I'm winding up, but I find it very engaging and intriguing that it is perhaps time and challenging to go back and look at the assumptions that we're making about how we act in the world, how we interact with the world, the subject-object relationship. And just to throw a couple names of people that are pursuing this from the science perspective is Metzinger and Donald Hoffman and even I'm drawing, I can't think of another name, but they're going back to question, using neuroscience and other methods, this whole concept of a Cartesian agent, a permanent homunculus that interacts, subject-object relationship, and we move along. So I think Heidegger was poking on those, saying, let's get out to the boundaries and re-look at our assumptions. Don't throw everything away. It's been very valuable, but look that there can be more than just that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot in there we can unpack. I'll keep in mind. How about Audrey? Audrey, go ahead. I'm not sure you're on. Muted, Audrey?
Yes, that's
There you
one
go.
of the
There you go.
issues. Technology doesn't allow me to speak unless I put myself on. I was thinking of what Matt was saying about seeing, if this relates to that. And because I found that really fascinating. And that's what made me start going to the web and looking at different things. And the one thing that I put on in your meetup was the one from Boston University, where somebody is trying to talk about Denken and taking that lecture apart by telling us what he means. And I found it really interesting because it's in it, apparently, Heidegger says one is not thinking if one does not rank objects of thought in terms of thought worthiness, which to me means seeing, which what Matt was saying. Excuse me. I have to cough, so you can take that from there.
So
I think there's a level of understanding that there's a quality to that. Then there's a judgment call. It's not just a something that's happening like running or playing tennis. You know, you can do it poorly or do it well. You can actually put that level of quality on your idea of seeing something or thinking about something, thinking about it to the point where it's actually, you become a master of it. You become an expert of it. You're not just taking it in passively. It's an active engagement with it. That's a far richer, far deeper association with the world than
Right, and it's more about, instead of critical thinking the way we've been taught in college or high school and college, it's more essential thinking is what I think Heidegger is talking about.
Yeah.
Audrey, you mentioned seeing, didn't you?
Seeing, and that's part of
Yeah.
the lecture. That I was just relating it back to the lecture.
Seeing, yeah.
But he did have
seeing something. It's seeing. It's like the way he talks about you look at something over and over again, and you see it in a different way. So
Right.
you expand your mind a little bit about, you're walking down a path and you just walking and you're noticing the flowers, but then you hone in. It's quite Buddhist for somebody that was a Nazi.
Yeah.
I'm pretty shocked.
But he also has this kind of I don't know if you'd call it a mind experiment, but a way of looking at things that he calls the disclosedness of the there. So in other words,
I don't know what that means.
It's like an objective responsibility. So in other words, objects and subjects aren't exactly in existentialism what you thought they were. In like completely Aristotelian terms, or who was it? Plato, right? Socrates. So the there, which is what stands for the objective in existentialism, has a disclosedness. It has a responsibility to us. So in other words, we actually look at something expecting that it's going to disclose itself, expecting that we're going to see something, possibly the truth or a truth, or understand the complexity or simplicity of something. But there's a disclosedness of the there that allows us to say, I see. In other words, we actually arrive through observing, through sight, through seeing at a realm of transparency. Not necessarily total transparency. I mean, we may see opacity, but we at least will see what the there or the object is willing to disclose to us. So I think that's something that I think is really useful. It becomes useful when you're trying to center yourself in that which you're trying to learn about, because it's not like all our responsibility to think things through or to necessarily think correctly or get it right, but the world sort of discloses itself to us. And part of the way it discloses itself to us is because we get centered on something that we identify a relationship we have with something, and it just discloses itself to us.
Is that related to the phenomenology that
Yeah, you
he
can call it,
mentions?
you can call that Heidegger's phenomenology.
Right.
In other words, the thing, I mean, the thing is ontology, and the world is ontology, and those are all his ontology.
Right.
And seeing is part of the composition of consciousness.
Right.
But that's the way he's basically talking about how phenomenology rewards us from the thing. It's not us. It's not the basically the. It would be wrong to think that it's a big thinking effort that humans do
Right.
that allows them to see things clearly. It's the disclosedness of
Right.
the world that, the disclosedness of the there that rewards us with what we see.
Right. Does it entail a intentionality of some sort?
Yeah, I was going to say, surely it's a collaborative procedure.
Right.
Yeah, it can't be passive.
Right.
You're bringing something to the table. You're bringing, your own background to it.
Right.
Well, the intention is not necessarily the disclosedness. In other words, he wants us to separate the phenomenology from the intention. So there may be intention, but the phenomenology is the phenomenology.
Right.
And the intention would be maybe part of the thinking that goes on, but there are higher levels of thinking perhaps than intention. In other words, maybe we don't accomplish everything through only intention, which is kind of like it's kind of like a psychological habit of talking that some psychologists have. They say, yeah, we intend to do this, and therefore, we accomplish it, and it's great. We have a great psychology, and it's not all the perfection of our psychology that allows us to see things clearly and to have foresight, for example.
Is that part of the idea of the readiness at hand that he talked about? That using tools and using the world, actually the world as an instrument of usefulness. So if you have that kind of intentionality, then there is a kind of, like you say, disclosing, phenomenological disclosing.
You might be right. It might be a precondition, but I see it also as a release. In other words, we can release ourselves from the necessity of having a whole bundle of intentions, in order to succeed in our authenticity, or succeed in our drive to be scientific and so forth. Right. There's this possibility that the truth is already, in a lot of cases, we get in the habit of discovering truth, and what truth can be, in that sense, is a lot of things that we actually observe and get in the habit of observing. And that could be the difference between someone who is kind of self-deceptive or someone who is like open to a lot of new concepts and ready to absorb a lot of knowledge that's available in the world.
James, so I'm new here too, and so I might be a little bit behind on the reading, but I don't really understand much of. You have a very eloquent way of speaking, and I'm a little bit new to this. So could you maybe help me understand what you're getting at?
Well, he has one concept that's very fundamental. It's called being in the world, and maybe that's where you're having a little bit of a difficulty. Being is just sign. Being is a problem that was set up by Descartes when he was summarizing Greek philosophy. He said in the Metaphysics, he said that there are only two metaphysical ideas that really count for Greek philosophy. And one of them is the one, and the other is being, and these are very confusing and very abstract. So Heidegger took the whole Heideggerian project is basically taking the being part and trying to locate where is being. And the truth is, Will, he locates being in consciousness. So, it's not, I mean, in the end, it's not as quite as complicated, I think, as he makes it in parts of the book. But the will, he locates will, and this becomes clear because of the way he contradicts and criticizes Descartes and Kant. So the will is actually he uses the word consciousness to try to locate where is being. He's not talking about any object. He's not talking about a rock. He's talking about das Sein. And das Sein is a German word that means being there, or there being. And it means that you're at any moment, what is at stake is where you are right now. So it's, in other words, it's like a high-speed runner. It's like an athlete. Any moment, the athlete is a great athlete because he's able to take where he is in that moment as being the crucial apex of his concentration, of his intention, of his activity, of his being. So where being is very important in Heidegger's unraveling. And the word, the world, is very important because the world is like a generalization. It means exactly everything that's not you, okay? So everything that you're concerned about, everything that you have that is a concern that is not yourself or even yourself, but everything that you have as a concern is the world. And being in the world means that you have to situate yourself there and then proceed from there in a kind of like a primordial ontological manner. So to find out how you operate in the world and what the truth is about how you operate in the world is. So in other words, you don't take for granted that you're already operating at full speed, even though you got your degree and you've got a great job and the best wife and everything. You don't take that for granted that you're actually operating in the world at full speed. You examine it ontologically, and he examines these things from a primordial perspective. In other words, going back to what would it be like if I was just simply das Sein, starting out for the first time, because that's what he does in the book. In the book, he is das Sein, starting out for the first time, trying to find out what is being in the world and what is at stake for being in the world, and so forth. Did I leave out something?
Well, I was gonna, oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm with, am I getting echo there?
That's
Are you
feedback.
A little bit, yeah.
That's called feedback, yeah.
Are you hearing
Go
echo?
ahead.
It means that there's another mic
got the
somewhere
window
in the
off.
room,
Okay.
perhaps.
Sorry, we're just, let me just turn up my volume here. I'm here with a friend and we had two computers on at the same time. Is there any echo that you're hearing?
No, it's gone now.
You're fine.
Oh, it's fine now. Okay, thanks. I wanted to applaud Will actually, because as somebody who is exploring philosophy as a hobby, and definitely feels that it is a particular domain that would enhance my field of is education, and I feel it would really enhance that. I'm really motivated to learn more about the different philosophers, as I feel they're foundational to so many things. But one just quick note, David, I applaud the lectures that you've been posting, because that's what I'm kind of seeking, and hopefully there are people in the group who can create very simplistic frameworks, so that I can kind of get in and understand Heidegger without committing to a 15-year 15-year commitment, because but as the professor was saying, because I think there's so much value from it. So I will often ask, what would a grade 5 student need to understand with this concept, so that it's very simplified? And I'm going to take an attempt at it, Will, because we were sort of talking about being, and my understanding is that basically, just like what the professor had said in the lecture notes, that Heidegger is challenging us to sort of not take for granted how we have come into the world as it is, and to start question the usual and make it unusual. And so, I've read Being in Time and still feel I need some more simplicity to understanding what his critical concepts are, and hopefully those can be addressed tonight by people who can put it in the simplest of terms. Think of me as the grade 5 student in the group, and with the simplest language as possible, or the simplest analogies. I mean, I would just love that.
Well, keep listening, keep coming to the lecture and listening to the audio, because Matt's series that we're going to go through over the next few weeks, I think, are probably the best way of getting to Heidegger. I think Matt's a great explainer. I think everybody's saying these are great. Yeah, he is. If you look at ratemyprofessors.com, Matt has like 4.8, 4.9 approval rating. Nobody gets approval ratings like that. He's an excellent teacher. He really is.
I'll check that. I'm pretty sure my professors I lived with my professors, literally. I'm sure that they have pretty good ones too.
Well, that's great. That's great that you did. Yeah. I was really lucky to get Matt.
4.9. Let me see.
Something like that. Yeah. No, he's really good, as you can tell from listening. Yeah, there's a lot here. There's a lot of richness here. I mean, you can certainly take this a number of different ways. I do think I heard one example where you have, this is just an anecdote of something like, I think it was in one airport or something, they had a sculpture, a decorative sculpture in the middle of the airport. And most people just either sat on it unthinkingly, or just ignored it completely, and like children would immediately gravitate towards it and begin climbing on it, or playing with it. It's just a different way than adults have of interacting with the world as given. I mean, doing something that it wasn't designed to do, but just approaching it differently. Just seeing the world differently. I think there's a lesson there somehow. I think the old phrase is the street finds its own uses for things, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. James, go ahead.
Well, just for Shauna, I did see something. Heidegger has some other books, and actually in some of the other books, it doesn't even seem like he's the same Heidegger. He did have two different philosophies. He was an absolute wizard at Greek philosophy. So there's a lot of books about his explanations of different Greek philosophers. He has a book on Kant, things like that. But this idea of simplifying is a very good one. And I think you'll possibly come up with some of your own ideas. I did see something, and I'm not sure if it's a very great source that I found it in, but I saw a kind of a comic book for children that was around the grade 5 level. And it was this idea of the big me and the little me. So in other words, there's these ideas in psychology that are probably coming from existentialism. And one of them might be the the big me and the little me. The idea the big me would be the authentic self, and the little me would be the inauthentic self, perhaps. And in the comic book, the children were being exhorted to always look out for the welfare of the big me. When there's a problem, when the little me gets into trouble, find out what the big me will do. Don't be the little me. So, and the idea was that you come up with a more authentic self-image. So that's psychology, but it's something that might be derived from Heidegger. Just a guess. Struck me that way when I read it.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
So to me, the Heidegger, so basically he's saying something like the Greeks, the old Greeks, they got it right. So they kind of let things be themselves, and they were in touch with the things as they were. But then Plato, Aristotle, and all the Western tradition happened. And what happened? We complicated things so much that we are not able to get in touch with the things as they are. And we kind of frame them as objects, as tools, as I mean, in the technological, like resources, as God's creation in the medieval time. And he said, we kind of need to simplify things and go back to things as they are. And when we use things, we kind of like, when he says, ready at hand, we kind of get in touch with things again. When we see them like present at hand, which is pretty much what science is doing, we lose touch again with things. So I think Heidegger is trying to say we need to get back to things as they are and let them be as they are, and try to somehow get rid of all this metaphysical baggage that we're accumulating for 2000 of years. And because what we do when these days, like we look at things and we define what they mean, we're like, he calls presencing, you know, like, and we focus on beings, on small beings, like things as they are. And we forget all this story that there is a being that gives them their being. And that's kind of the big story here. And he said, we try to go back, take, like, not necessarily step back, but more like get close to things and not be so rational as we are, but be more practical, get involved with things. And then we get a glimpse at what things are. And then in the process, we also acknowledge what being, the one that give all these things their being, is. So I think it's kind of a story of going back to things, simplifying things, and yeah, at least that's my take.
I'd like to chime in.
Go for it. Yeah.
And carrying on from what James was previously saying as well, and what Dan was just saying, the idea, the simplifying is perhaps bringing it back to looking at our assumptions, and in fact, looking at our intentions, in that, as James was pointing out, where the object is presenting itself, right? We're not creating, there's an object and it's presenting itself, and then we take it in and we process it. And it's on that part of it where the intention comes in. And I think in the lecture, the intention being, am I looking at this thing as a tool, as a usefulness, as something I can gain from it, as something I can understand? Is it a danger? Yeah. So I already have an intent of what I am trying to bind this thing to, right? And in the lecture, he was referring to checkers. And he differentiated Denken from, in the end, from a word he just chose to use, worlding. And I get that sense that the simplification, if you will, but it's very challenging, is to step back into our own assumptions. Also, as he had pointed out from the ontological standpoint, the glasses we were given from birth, and throw culture in there. So we have a almost unconscious approach to what is presented, right? Two people looking at the same tree can experience two different things. So it's on the one hand understanding that interaction with the world, in fact, you could say, is a reduction process where the totality of what is out there is there, but we then wrap it up in our intention of what are we wanting to get out of it. And what I was getting from the Heidegger bit is he is proposing that we step back and question those intentions. We question the assumptions that we bring with us. And the hard part of that is, it's like the child asking why. The deeper you go, the more questions you ask, you start potentially uncovering assumptions that you didn't even realize you had. Not just assumptions, beliefs, value systems, things that are just, David, like you were saying earlier, baked in, right? We have a whole part of us which is baked in. And the challenging part, getting out to the boundaries, getting to that horizon, is to try to crack that glass open and not necessarily throw anything away, but see how is that glass formulated. So that's all.
And I believe when you mention intention, we place ourselves in this subject-object frame, because intention presupposes a subject, and when you approach something else outside there, in general we frame it as an object. And also, if we approach it as something useful, we pretty much are in the technological framework that Heidegger later mentioned. So I think he's trying to go back again to what it means to be, for something to be, and that's kind of the primordial stuff. It's not how we approach, but how things are, what gives them their being, like their presencing, their existence, And probably one more thing to mention, I think in Heidegger's world there are three things of beings. One is what he calls beings ready at hand, present at hand, and then Dasein. So he thinks everything can be classified in this one of these three things, and the presence of hand is the worst, according to Heidegger. For Dasein, we have all the existential approach, and then for ready at hand, that's when we kind of get in touch with things as they are, or close to the way they are.
Could I ask somebody for maybe an example of describing something as we normally do versus describing something as Denken is the word? Is that, or like the being of the thing?
Well, I will try to so when you probably we are already in a world, and we already define it. We are given what is there and what is not. But if we look in time, like for example, you look at something and you say what it means for that thing to be, and in the medieval world, it was created by God, and that's what it means for something to be. And if it was not created, or then that thing is not there. In the modern world, if you frame it as a subject, as an object, that thing is there, and otherwise it's not, if you cannot frame it as an object. And in modern world, if you approach something as a resource, that thing is there. If you cannot approach it, then it doesn't exist in our world. So it's kind of this and the being is what gives these things this character. And it's not by the way we think, it's more like the way we interact with them, how we, I think for Heidegger, thinking is important, but it's not as important as the practice, as being engaged with things. That's how we get to know them, not by debating or thinking about them, but by engaging with them. I don't know, it's quite abstract, but I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not solipsism. Okay, it's more well, you have a readiness at hand. It means you have the potential of an entangledness or an involvement with an object. If something is present at hand, it means that it can be described. Its main value is that it can be described. So that's all. It's just the readiness hand as a way of establishing where Dasein actually has a presence in the world of the object. So that's the readiness at hand means that Dasein has a presence already because there's already an involvement, there's already an entanglement that can be established. So that and it was really great, Dan, that you brought up the horizon, because we're going to, I hope we're moving towards that, as describing what is the horizon and what something that Heidegger calls the temporalizing of temporality, which I think I hinted at when I mentioned athletes. Athletes are always temporalizing temporality. And so it's a natural state for man. It's just that we don't all participate in it to the same degree. And it's a kind of a shortcut to to having an authentic horizon.
Yeah. I took a phenomenology class, and I had the hardest time with authenticity. It took me a long time. I think I got a handle on it now, but at the time I couldn't figure it out. It's kind of like, it's like water. It just slips through your fingers. It's like smoke.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also like there's a book by Kierkegaard, who was like the first existentialist, and called that he titled Either Or, and it's probably his most difficult book because it doesn't seem to mean anything. But I think what he meant was you can think this way or you can think that way and still be the same person. And your events, your experiences will be one way, and your experiences could be another way. But you could have the same consciousness. You could still be the same reader of the book, for example. So it's a very difficult book. I don't recommend it. He has like other books that he wrote that I think are easier. But I think that's what he was talking about. That's what he meant, is that there can be an inauthentic way of doing something, or an authentic way, or a blue way, or a red way. You know, it's just simply a question of where you focus your horizon. Not the way you focus on a thing, but the way you focus on your existential horizon.
Oh, by the way, they're reading that book on Friday at a meetup, 5 o'clock, I believe, Pacific time. Yeah, they were reading it last week. I think they're going to continue reading it this week. That very book you're describing. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, it's like I said, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but now I think I know what he was getting at. He was just.
So how does that relate to authenticity? Is Kierkegaard saying that
yeah,
these roles that he takes on, acting different roles, yeah. Is that authentic, or is that not?
That's like inauthenticity and authenticity. A way to understand authenticity is that you refocus your horizon. You were focusing on an inauthentic horizon. You were focusing on thrownness, fallenness, the problems of existence. You were focusing on all the problems of existence, not making enough money, not being a good enough lover last night. Whatever it is today, but today I'm having a bad day, so I know what that is. So it's whatever you're focusing on can be your inauthenticity. It can be, and you actually feel it, like the walls are closing in on you. It's like there's a horizon, there's a tight horizon to inauthenticity. I'm afraid my boss is going to fire me. All those crappy things that sort of come up. How can I possibly get this assignment done, before class starts on
Sure,
Monday.
right.
So it's this, there's that inauthentic horizon, but there's also an authentic horizon. And that would be the basically everything that you can create of your own.
Well, I think at the beginning of Being Time, Heidegger describes authentic as a consciousness of yourself, right? And inauthentic is the consciousness of how others see yourself.
Okay, well, that's a simplification, but yeah, I accept that. That's
Right, right.
that's there's one of the biggest problems that he describes, and Kierkegaard does in one of his books, although I haven't read Kierkegaard's books, but it's the idea that the other is going to ruin your day.
Oh yeah.
And he just says, you know, one of the themes that runs through Being in Time, you know, is like there is a problem with the they. It's not always clear the way he explains it, but the idea is that the they is the biggest contributor to the most dynamic contributor to breakdowns, the most dynamic contributor to fallenness.
Right.
And it's the upholder of your thrownness. In other words, it knows who you are. The they knows who you are.
Mhm.
So you'll never be anyone but who the they knows if it's up to them. You're going to have to change their perception or change the conversation, change the discourse, in other words, of how they know you.
Right.
Because they know you by your thrownness, they know you by the way you were yesterday. They have no idea that you're something beyond that.
What was the name of that?
Your horizon is limited by the day.
Right. What is the name of that Jean-Paul Sartre play where I think he's describing hell is other people?
That's No Exit.
Yeah. I think you're right. No. It's I think it is. Yeah. No exit. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's only one door, and it's only used for the guy coming in to find out where everyone is. He doesn't
Right.
do anything.
Right.
And related to authenticity, I think the most important that Heidegger aspect is the death. So we kind of live in this world believing that somehow we escape death, and the moment that's the most important one. We take that, we say it's ours. No one can take that from me. It's me who is going to die, and the moment that's kind of the crucial moment when we become authentic. And by the way, I think the being thrown in the world, that's kind of to Heidegger, it's a positive. So we are by definition thrown. We just need to assume that, and don't hide, and don't try to conceal it or from ourselves, but assume it and live like that.
It's all very self-actualizing, isn't it? Almost power of positive thinking. Yeah, I always think of it as basically psychological health, like you know, scientific rigor or ethical correctness, justice. But yeah, I think yeah, that the dimension of the human experience that we roughly call psychology, you know, has only been a field of endeavor for what, 150 years now, and I think that cuts to the core of the authenticity question. Yeah, and it's not something that you get a lot of in psychology, in traditional philosophical inquiry.
So the fact that we have to study the way that we think now, 150 years until present, is evidence that we did understand ourselves before that, or I don't understand.
I
Well,
don't.
I think what David is saying is that there was no psychology before about 150 years ago.
Yeah, but
people,
was
people
that,
like
but was
William
that
James was the first one to use the word, I think.
but was that because we understood ourselves and didn't need to study it before then, or is it like why? What was the point about?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how well people understood themselves. I do know how Kant understood us, so that's an example. And I know how Descartes understood us to a certain extent. That Descartes understood us as being decorporalized thinking. So in other words, decorporealized thinking. In other words, the opposite in a way of Heidegger. We thought, but we didn't think inside a body. We didn't think inside a real world. Everything was a little bit fake in the world. The only thing that was really important in existence is that we could think about it.
Right,
So,
like think about yourself.
So people had different ideas about thinking before there was psychology. Psychology was just like came after Kant. Kant figured out a model for how thinking and moralizing worked. So in other words, he thought he created a model for the mind that said there was a source of sensations that was going to subject us to hell, essentially, hell on earth, our experience, if you will. So experience was going to come along because we just had this touchy-feely existence, right? And then there were ways of thinking that we had, which were separate from that, which could be described logically. And then if you want to really go through hell as a philosopher, you'll read Kant's books on those subjects. But that was the because that's the only thing I can think of that's much more complex than Heidegger's critique of pure consciousness. So you want to take that on. That is a pre-psychological model of how we think, right or wrong. And then psychology came along because people became interested in the variation in how people's personalities and people's speech and so on and so forth. People's behavior. Some people are criminals. Some people are saints, perhaps. That was the birth of psychology.
Yeah, well,
was this the Kant book?
Huh? The Kant?
Critique of Pure
Was
Reason.
it Critique?
Critique of Pure Reason. The better book
Okay.
is Critique of Practical Reason because it's a little bit easier, and it actually deals with thinking, but it deals with thinking about the world. Critique of Pure Reason tells you why you shouldn't think about the world. So I'm not saying don't read that book, but it's a much more difficult book. The Critique of Practical Reason is more practical. And a little skinnier too.
So in the Critique of Pure Reason, he's talking about, he's saying that we don't really have knowledge, and we shouldn't expect to have knowledge of the world, right? And he tells you why we don't have knowledge of the world. And in the Critique of Practical Reason, he's saying that even though we don't have knowledge of the world, we should act this way. We should, act in the world based on our limited knowledge of the world. Well, based on these moral principles.
It's about as good a job as I can do, James.
I don't know.
Sorry.
It's kind of weird out. It's a little bit confusing.
That's right.
Yeah, I never could read it. It was totally beyond my comprehension. My friend gave it to me. I was never about to. It was he signed it like if you're smart you'll read this, and I was like, all right, that's beyond me. But
There's
I was just
there's some pretty good there's some pretty good YouTube videos, lectures on that, and they'll take you right through the to the very beginning of the understanding, how the understanding is achieved by a priority and a posteriori synthetic reasoning and so forth, that because it's he creates a mind that is separate from the world, but he's saying that you can begin to interact with the world by doing these things, right? By these intuitions, and we have intuitions of space-time within our minds. Space-time is not out there; it's in our minds that we create. we conceptualize the world based on these intuitions. Yeah, but it is very complicated. But you might be able to find some YouTube videos that it sort of helped me understand it anyway. What it boils it down to.
Sounds almost stoic.
Yeah.
But it was. I didn't mean to sidetrack the conversation.
That's okay. That's okay.
It was,
No, I think that it's a little bit relevant because the question of psychology came up. So that's it's pre-Heidegger and post-Heidegger, but the why did psychology take so long to appear? And I think the answer is that you maybe needed something like Kant and phenomenology before people started getting interested in what about this phenomena of human behavior. For people to start getting interested in the phenomena of human behavior, maybe phenomenology needed to be reborn, and that started to become popular in around the 1830s, 1850s. In that time period, you had Hegel and Schelling. You had these phenomenological philosophers, and Heidegger's teacher called himself a phenomenologist. That was Husserl, yeah. So phenomenology came very popular right about the same time as psychology did, and not that far off.
And going back to Kant, so one problem Heidegger has with Kant, for example, is this: like Kant in the tradition of Descartes and Plato and so on assumes that, for example, takes for granted there is a substance, and that's what it calls that. It means it's a being. So there are two kinds of substances, res extensa and res cogitas, and basically Kant, they said, there they are. So he's already assuming that those things are. So that's what Heidegger calls already. Kant situates himself in this framework of subject-object without questioning it, and that's basically Heidegger says that's a big problem. We cannot take Kant very seriously because of that, because as we see in the history, what it means to be changed several times. But when Kant wrote these books, that was taken for granted, that what it means to be, that there is a substance and with two types. And Heidegger said that's not acceptable, and that's what we are trying to deconstruct here and say that what it means to be goes way deeper, and this is a metaphysical assumption, and we need to, I don't know, take it down and see what's left after we do that.
So could you say that Heidegger is all about the relationship between the subject and the object?
No, because when you assume substance, and substance like Descartes said that there are two types of substances he postulated. One is extensa, like the world, like a substance. He said, you have any object is the substance, and then you have a shape. So when you have a rock, it's a substance in a shape, and the substance is given there, and that's kind of highly metaphysical to assume that. And then you have a subject that has a spiritual substance, and that's also eternal and given, and that's problematic, and it's coming from a certain tradition. So now you try to go beyond that, because when you assume that, you say that substance, either one of those two is, you place yourself in a certain type of what being or what it means to be. And Heidegger said we need to go deeper, and deeper in the sense that reject this and try to see what it means actually. Go back to the question what it means to be. That's what Heidegger said, and don't assume it.
It's a redefinition of the subject. In other words, it's a redefinition of being as consciousness. So it is clearly the project is a redefinition of being, and to clarify, being in the world, not extended substance or anything like that, but being in the world with all of its multiple forms.
Basically, he puts them together, both kind of what he said, being in the world is more primordial than subject object. So if you are working this framework of being in the world, you understand subject object as a special case or something like that. And then, so for example, if you go like, like in this subject object world, you have what's called truth as correspondence, and we have what's called representations. And you have always what it means for something to correspond to something else, like our representation with an object in the world. And Heidegger said, if you try to work in this subject object, you'll never get this. Those things never touch each other. They always are separated. But if you go more primordial in this, what James just mentioned, like being in the world, those things kind of, they are together there, and the correspondence is kind of trivial. So it's kind of, and this goes even deeper. What probably we should mention what Heidegger means by what truth is, and the what aletheia. That's kind of the fundamental concept. Like a world opens, and there things are kind of together, and then like they belong together, and what we these they call object subject, they pretty much they are together. That's why you can say that there is a correspondence, and that's in this worldview that the correspondence is trivial. If you stay in the subject object, it's a mess. You cannot resolve this problem.
So ultimately, is being a substance? Is being a substance or not a substance?
No, because when you say it's a substance, you make it already an individual being, and that's kind of like, for example, what Nietzsche criticized, that you make God the substance, and then you evaluate God, and pretty much Heidegger this is the big story with being with capital B. That's not a substance. It's something else.
Right. So is being finite or infinite?
It's beyond that. It's kind of, again, it's what gives individual beings their being. So when you say that something is, that's pretty much what's behind that statement. It's being with capital B. And as I said, it changed several times. So it's very difficult to say what being is, because it's kind of.
I kind of have an idea about this. I think he says being is located in time. I mean, being is stuck in the world for Heidegger. I mean, it's stuck in the world. You can't separate being from the world. So if you want to say the world is substance, you could say that being is part of the world because it's sort of stuck to the substance. So that's fine, but that's not, unless you're trying to create a correspondence with someone like Spinoza,
Yeah. So I think about Spinoza.
and create a new meaning for his qualification of substance, and which was then used, but Heidegger actually argues against that because he feels that was the biggest problem with Descartes to Leibniz, Descartes and Leibniz to Kant. The kind of path they got stuck on was that feeling that the substance was the thing, and the substance wasn't the important path. The important path for Heidegger is being. So that's so it's being, and being is delineated by time.
Okay.
So we can't say that being is infinite or anything like that. Okay. Being is we're stuck in time, and there's something in the book called Being Unto Death, which is very important. So there's this kind of a rejection of the there's a rejection of the taboo against death.
Okay. Right. But
Is
is it a process then? Is it, if you're saying being is time is a movement, right? Of a movement, Bergson calls it a duration, right?
I will take a shot at this, and I will think that the closest Heidegger comes to this. So first, it happens in time. So being is manifest. It's not like something atemporal. So it's coming from beyond, like we say, I don't know, God or something. So probably, I think Heidegger gives a few examples. So one is like what he said, like a Greek temple. It's an example of something that gives being to the beings around it, or a church in a medieval time, or a work of art. Or you can think, I don't know, Jesus, who I don't know, came on earth and created some new meaning that wasn't there before. And then after that, we can see things through that kind of, like things that didn't have any meaning and didn't exist, started to exist after that. So this kind of examples of a being.
Really?
Is there a word that might be useful as well? I'm thinking in the sense of experiential and trying to capture experience in the sense of being in a conceptual framework, and being bound by language, and that being its own stumbling block. Only in that it creates its own challenge, where if you get into the idea of a thing or a substance or even just concept or a language, there is a bounding there. It's like digital versus analog. Once you bring it into, which is itself obviously very useful, but once you bring it into the realm of language and concept, there's boundaries put around it, where an experience is more analog, where it just is. It's to use maybe a bad example of trying to take a photo while you're standing in the middle of a canyon, and then sharing that photo with someone elsewise. You've got a capture of it and it's beautiful, but the experience happened, and which is not captured in that photo. And the element of time is that the experience is over, and there was a period before the experience. So it's that temporality that the beingness comes into being and goes out of being, and comes into being and out of being. But the experiential aspect of it, as opposed to trying to bound it all just in language and concept.
Well, Charlie, let me ask you a question. When are you out of being yourself? I mean, when are you out of being? When are you not being?
I've tried. Okay, let me first try to process the question, right? And if am I aware of being aware, or am I just aware of something, right? So two different levels of being there, where and again that when I'm aware of something and not being aware of being aware. Right. It's like another example of being in a movie theater or TV, where I'm so wrapped up in the show, I've lost aspect that I'm actually in a theater, right? And then I hear somebody's popcorn chewing, and all of a sudden I'm back out and say, oh, that's right, I'm in a movie, right? So in both instances, that beingness is always there, right? When I'm not being, if I'm attempting to understand your question, is when I'm not aware that I'm in the theater and I'm fully engaged in the movie. I am having an experience, but I'm bounded at that point by the whole concept of, what this movie's about, the right, all of that, the script and everything, which I accept in the moment. It's an enjoyment factor, right? And it can also be very useful. Take it out of the theater and, interacting with people and getting a job done and all these things. So it's, there's no value in it. It's all that. But there is a difference between being caught up in thought and being totally identified with all of that, or being aware, stepping back. Maybe the runner example is, if I'm carrying history with me and future with me, right? Then in that moment on the track, right, I'm remembering about I slipped at the beginning, and I'm wondering if that's going to affect me, in winning, right? Or I forget all of that, and I am just, putting all my energy into the beingness, in that moment.
So
It's an attempt at offering a response.
Well, yeah,
So
as
you
you were
tur-
talking, I was thinking of, you're watching a movie. If it's a great movie and you're caught up in it, and you're what they call suspension of disbelief, right? Maybe if it's a great work of art, and that kind of suspension of disbelief is is a more expansion of your being, right? So you maybe have a greater sense of being through art. And there is a meetup coming up, I think, next week on this very topic, Heidegger and their work in art. That might be, there are certain times, like through art or through music or through maybe religious experiences, right? You might have a greater sense of experience of being, where you're out of, right?
I just want a quick response. That was very good input, very good example, and that brings up on the science side this default mode network, where whether you're being self-referential or not, and in that sense, where you're a great piece of art or whatever, and you have lost yourself and you have become completely experienced in that. That was a good, yeah. It could be another level of experience, or a different type of experience.
So that kind of self-consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So as opposed to the opposite, which is this kind of self-consciousness, maybe the self-consciousness is preventing you from having these experiences of being. Is that possible? I don't know.
Or maybe just expanding your horizon, the boundaries of your horizon by being totally involved in that moment, but being aware that you're involved in that moment. Isn't that expanding your horizons while knowing where you are?
These are all, for me, these are all levels of, I think Charlie said it right. There are levels of awareness that we pass through from time to time. Like if you're having a bad day, it might be because your awareness is low or something. So the awareness can change with time. And we know that, especially if we plan to make awareness a project. I really like the other thing you said too, Charlie. You're watching the movie and you become part of it. You become disinvolved from yourself. And to me, this is the idea that experience can be transcendental. In other words, you can experience something and it will actually change your being. And I think that's what you're talking about when you're in the theater and you see yourself becoming less aware, you said. But what's really happening is that you are actually transitioning to another mode of being because of experience, because of the experience in the now. So the experience the experience you're having as temporality. In other words, the lives of the saints or the lives of the criminals on the screen, you're actually becoming part of their experience, and it shows the transcendental nature of experience, because that kind of a change in being might always be available.
I very much like what you just stated, and just to add a couple more words, the transcendental, I refer to it as self-transcendent, meaning stepping out of self, right? And this default mode, self-referential mode, that is very, operative, very, very good. And just that the way I like to think of it, and this is very unscientific, this is just my own personal, but a certain capacity, I just refer to as attentional awareness of how much I have at any given moment, in how much attention I can give to something. And I can use a number 7. There are 7 things I can pay attention to, right? Or I can pay attention to 4 and add more attentional awareness to those 4, right? And to the degree that the default mode network is on, that we're being self-referential, there's some level of attention being applied to that. As James, what you just gave that idea that, okay, if I can step out of that, and in the degree I can apply all my attentional awareness on one particular thing, right? And I think that sometimes is intimated as that state of flow, right? In the end, it's all experiential, right? But there's different states of experience, different consumption of the attentional awareness. And going back to Heidegger, I think it's the questioning element is, what are all the constructs we're bringing into any given moment of experiential awareness?
Yeah, that once again, that's slicing and dicing, and also the self-awareness might not be as important as awareness of other things. In other words, maybe you have a lot to be aware of, and by going through too many steps of self-awareness, that could actually limit you. That could be a problem, potentially. So that's all. You just want to unleash your potentiality. And whatever your potentiality is might have to do with a number of things. The kinds of horizons that you are able to set, the amount of awareness that you are able to achieve, but not necessarily the self-awareness, because remember, the actual transcendental experience that you had was when you were focusing on a screen, after all. You're almost doing Plato's allegory of the cave, to be honest. But that was perhaps one of the, for a lot of us, that can be like, holy smokes, I went and saw the movie Fargo, and it changed my life. I mean, people do have those experiences just by watching a movie, or reading a book. So that the self is not always the best target for your focus. That's just my counter to what you said.
I think we're
it's okay to be
agreement,
self-conscious, but yeah.
So when
we're in
Heidegger,
agreement. Well, I just want to close out. No, we're actually in agreement, right? I was just pointing out that that transcendental is transcending that self, right? And the being able to be aware of self, be aware that there is a self, right? And allowing that to free up the reins of all the constructs and assumptions that we bring with us. When we're not aware of that self, we are bringing all these checkers that Heidegger was talking about with us without even being aware that we're bringing that with us, right? So stepping back to say, there is a self, there is this game of checkers, but there's more than that. And that frees up the energy to then have a transcendent experience outside of this self. So I think we're speaking the same way.
yeah, when Heidegger talks about, the idea of care, he's talking about a care for the world or care for the self.
I think he's usually speaking about care for the world. In other words, what do we care about? Do we automatically care about ourselves? Is that would be called egoism or something? But we might care for, we might have compassion. Our compassion might be stronger. Our concern for our parents and our brothers and sisters, our spouse, our children, might be as powerful or more powerful than ourselves. So it's wherever you get your power, that's up to you. I'm not saying that you have to think of others, but we do have kind of like what do you call that besides compassion?
Empathy.
Empathy, yeah. So we do sort of have this kind of like psychological trick that causes us to care about others and care about things in the world.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, I just watched a video the other day, and the guy was talking about how computers changed his life. Somebody came to him one day because he was good at fixing the sound on computers and said, "You're good at computers. You should do that." And he had no idea what he should do. He was kind of like a bum, right? And he had no idea what he could do with computers, but somehow he discovered Linux and it changed his life. So the idea is there, I think is really good, is that your target is really probably not in here. You already got this. So that's all I'm saying. It's like, this is kind of like, in a way, this is given. You may not think very much of it, but you might not be seeing it clearly. Maybe you need to spend a little bit more time interacting with others, and you start to get a sense of who you are. And then, but it's really the others that take you to the next step. It's the computers or the friends that will tell you the truth about yourself, even if it's unpleasant. That outside is probably, the world, in other words, is probably more valuable than your self-reflection.
Sounds like an ethical principle, almost.
Almost, but I think it's physical too. Yeah. We care about other people and we care about other things, and when we do that, we start to exceed ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I see it as a physical principle of human beings in the world.
Right. It's because we had a discussion about is there such a thing as altruism as opposed to egoism, and some people argue one way or the other. So this sounds like more leans towards the altruism, this idea of care.
Yeah, I don't think we need to judge people for choosing in one direction or another. I just think that it's just a question of where does it lie? Where does it lie? And the Heidegger would say it lies in the there. Mm-hmm. So there can be here, no question about it. No question that we can just take there and concentrate it in the I. But there is a there that lies beyond the I. So to become authentic, you definitely want to be concerned about some of that out there. Out there is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about time that I'd like to pose, if I could borrow people's time. James, this would be especially directed toward you, but of course to anyone else who feels they may want to reply. I've read, I hear a lot more about the being in the context of being in time than I do about time. I hear a lot about Dasein. And I'm hesitant to just see time as sort of being this linear temporality in the context of Heidegger, because that just seems too simple and almost too close to this modern space-time scientific understanding. I understand that we're supposed to be a little pre-scientific when we come to Heidegger. We're supposed to have even like deeper understand, linear temporality is just too simple and too and just almost too close to this scientific mode of understanding of time than Heidegger might like. And so I've heard of time sort of being, and that's just me going off on a limb there. So I understand that. I have heard sort of time as being as sort of mapping onto, in Heidegger's terms, as being sort of a field of intelligibility, or as being sort of like a unity against which things would be contrasted. And so with all of that in mind, I would ask, what is one of the missing elements of Heidegger's time outside of just, again, linear temporality?
Right. And so he calls this is really difficult at first, but he calls this the temporalizing of temporality. So in other words, time is, in a way, the sticking together of things in time. It's self-referential definition. It's terrible. So the sticking of things, events, the sticking together of events, we call that time. Now, temporality is being able to isolate time. So in other words, if we say, I have one day to live, so I'm going to live till tonight at 9:30, and then I'm going to go to bed. So I'm only concerned with this 3.5 hours or whatever it is. Yeah, one hour that I have to consider my temporality. Now, how do I temporalize? Heidegger asks, how do I temporalize the temporality? Because the temporalizing is basically how you make the best fit with your horizon. So in other words, you have a horizon of foresight into the rest of the evening, and you know how it's going to end. You know you're going to go to sleep, hopefully, and your temporalizing of that is just a reflection of how you see your time horizon. Your time horizon that you've given yourself here, in this case, is just 1 hour. So you know how you're going to spend, how you need to solve the problem of how you're going to spend the next hour. So I'm not going to leave the meetup. I'm going to, or the Zoom, I'm going to try to stay engaged with the Zoom right till the bitter end. And that's my kind of temporalizing of temporality. And the way I sort of hide myself and display myself in the conversation, that's another part of my temporalizing of temporality, just as it was when you spoke up and say, I have this question about linear time. Linear time can't be that important. Well, by itself, it's not. But the fact that we do actions in the world during that time, that is important. So the actions that we actually promote, the actions we actually engage in is of utter importance, just like the things we say are important. So asking questions, trying to answer questions, those are all important examples of the temporalizing of temporality that is part of design.
So that's related to how you are going to the quality of your being is based on your being able to temporalize. You have a horizon of what your life is going to be. You have a sense of the horizon of your life, and that would affect how you comport yourself as a being, right?
Right. And you have a choice of how close or how far you want to set that horizon.
Sure, right.
It's not like something that's fixed, and it's not like you only have one horizon. But the horizon is key, and basically the conscious not the linear explanation of what happens in 1 hour of a typical night, but the temporalizing of temporality creates our actions against the backdrop of our horizon.
So that temporalizing is your awareness, right, of the time that you have left, or the sense of how much time you have left.
Not just time, not just time, being. Being.
Just being. Okay.
In other words, you can't do what I do. I can't do what you do.
Right.
We are separate beings. So this being, Dasein, who we both represent in our own ways, is basically, has to deal with limited horizons. You can sort of be Aristotle. You can play Aristotle or soccer, for a moment if you want to, and you can say, well, my horizon is 1,000,000 years from now. When the lights on the earth go dark, they'll still be talking about me. Maybe it's a Beethoven complex, perhaps. Or we could settle for a little bit less. But the idea is that you set your horizon, and then you be that person. And that's the cool thing, for an ex-musician. That's one of the things that that's one of the consciousness exercises we used to play when you're a musician. You say, oh my God, did the Beatles know they were going to be that big? Or if you're a rock musician, or if you're a classical musician, you say, did Bach understand, how nobody was going to be able to touch him, and what he was good at, Did Beethoven realize that he was going to make people squirm with pleasure, thousands of years in the future? I mean, well, not thousands of years, but hundreds of years in the future. So it's this kind of like, how do you explain that greatness? How do you explain that immortality? Well, these people had a horizon. You develop a horizon. It doesn't have to be that big, but it can be, but it is yours. So it's perfect. That's really what's perfect about us, I think. And that's part of what Heidegger is explaining here, is what's good about us is that we set the rules.
Is that the they?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is that the they that you were talking about before?
No.
That's not, because no. Did Beethoven know that he was going to be?
I'm talking about the me. I'm talking about the Dasein. In other words, the Dasein sets its own rules. So Heidegger is looking for this excuse to set us free, in a sense. That's what he's doing. He's trying to close the gap between Johann Sebastian Bach and little James Cook here. So he's trying to close that gap so that we can understand that the horizon is something that, we have the vision of. We have a vision. Another word for it might be vision. We have a vision of our horizon, and then we set the rules on how we're going to get there in time. And so time isn't just the day-to-day. It's knowing that the day-to-day is divided, and knowing that the day-to-day is really just a process of realizing your goals or realizing your projects. And somebody like Mozart would just sit on the pool table and scribble something over an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, and it would be a symphony. It would be something that would become one of his 110 symphonies or piano sonatas or whatever. So the scribblings for some beings are really important. And Einstein was the same way. Did you ever go to the website where, I don't know if anyone's interested in math, but if you go to the website where Einstein's writings are all there, you can read these writings. You can read the early writings and so forth. And he was just a whiz at math. The secret is that he could just figure out and explain what the math of things were, and like other people were not able to do, because we all have this, right? We all have a kind of we have this thinker, the Denken, and if you want to call it that, and the consciousness is capable of being unleashed, but you have to unleash it in your own world, and you have that world to contend with, and you have those others, and you have those others, and you have that. I forget now, but you know, the point is that the world is complex, but in a way, being is somewhat more simple because there's only one of us. So that's all. I think that's the way I sort of see the opening. The opening is being able to achieve the things that are on your horizon, not because there's linear time, but because of your capacity to temporalize time.
So once awareness of being is also in time, right? And that means that you're also aware of your own mortality.
Yep.
Unless you believe in an afterlife.
It might be the most important horizon or not.
So later on in his writings, I believe Heidegger talked a bit more about language. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps, James, or again, anyone else who feels comfortable, sort of locate language in being and time, or juxtapose it with Dasein. You have 60 seconds.
Well, I'll take it real quick. The language is a way of being precise. So we use language to be precise about the world. That's my experience with language. It's a way of being precise, in addition to be a way of communicating. It's what enables us to take part in discourse, which is one of the main ingredients of care. The structure of care involves discourse. You can't care for things if you don't use discourse. So you can't care for yourself if you don't use discourse. And discourse goes on with us or without us. So language is very important because it's a stepping stone to being precise and engaging with other people, other designs. We can engage with other designs using language. So it's massively important.
Does Heidegger treat language as like a tool also? Does Heidegger treat language like a tool?
I forget if he says that, but you can simply say that language is a tool. Right. But what kind of tool is it? It's a tool. You also have to look at what its primordial purpose is. Sure. Its primordial purpose is to allow you to be precise. Right. Its purpose is to allow you to engage in dialogue and what's that other word? Discourse. So to engage in discourse, you kind of need the language. It's a primordial tool, just like probably the hammer. There was probably some kind of hammers and primordial. They were called stones, I think. Yeah. So rocks. Yeah. So you think about the primordial purpose of things, and you probably come up with what the existential meaning of those things is.
Right. Seems like Wittgenstein would agree with that, because he seems to treat language as something useful, right? And the meaning comes out of how you use language.
All I can remember is the game. I just
language.
I didn't finish. I didn't get through the book.
Right. I think Audrey probably knows about that. Right, Audrey?
What did you say?
Well, I just mentioned Wittgenstein because you're in that group, you know.
Oh yeah, I was thinking of that. Yeah, yeah.
Where he talks about language as a game, but it's a language is a tool that you use, and the meaning of how you use it, you know, derives from.
Well, I mean, he was saying that language is use. I mean that language is. I mean, this is the way I understand it. That in other words, talking to you, I'm 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 thinking about you first of all. So there's the thought of me communicating with you. And so it's not me trying to create meaning from the words that I use. There's no set rules for what game I'm playing. It's I'm taking in the whole effect, which that's, I mean, didn't Heidegger and Wittgenstein, I mean, work together or?
No, they didn't. Wittgenstein read Heidegger and commented on Heidegger, but I don't think I don't think it was vice versa, especially because Heidegger was interested in the Greeks.
There
Huh?
was a wholeness about language that you know, language is only good as the context that it's in. And the way I read Heidegger in terms of being authentic and the way he talks about Denken is that it has to do with the world that you're in, that you're relating on a whole level. And it's not one way, it's not one dimensional. And so, yeah, I think that after what was the first thing that Wittgenstein wrote? The
Tractatus.
Yeah. Well, that's where he was like totally focused on logic, and everything was logical, and logic was like the science, and that was the way to go. And then he turned it around. Not that he was throwing away logic and what he was saying in the Tractatus, but he was definitely, I can never say the word, excuse me, but what he's saying now is that language is different. There's a whole different view to it, and that you have to take it in context. And I can understand what he got from Heidegger in terms of going that route. So the investigations are very interesting. If anybody just wants to read it, like even the first 35 paragraphs, of course it's very long, but if you want to read the first 35 paragraphs or something, you'll get the idea of where he's going, and then you can decide if you agree or not. But I find it totally and completely fascinating. And that's all I have to say about that, because guys, I don't know about you, but I'm getting tired.
Yeah, Shauna left, but nice to hear from you, Audrey. It was great. It's great meeting.
Yeah, it was a good meeting. And I'm not saying it should end just because I'm tired. I'm just saying I'm tired. And if you want me to be part of the world, you have to accept that I'm tired.
Yeah. Well, I think we did a good run today. We got like 2 hours of conversation here. This is a great series. I think as we keep going with it, I think you'll find there's a lot more to plumb here in Heidegger. I hope you're all enjoying Matt's lectures, and there's a lot more.
David, is it possible you could disclose your outline, that you could send me a list of the what you're going to present in each meeting, so that I sort of like know not to jump too fast, or does it not even matter?
Well, okay. I mean, I don't mind that at all. I'll send you the whole collection if you want to blitz through them.
just the titles would be enough, you know. I mean, but yeah, if you want to send me the outlines, yeah, that's.
Oh,
that's
I
fine.
create the title on extempore every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Well, if you send that to me, I'll probably look at it and try to pace myself a little bit, you know, because I'm always sort of thinking, you know, should I say this or should I just like keep it for another meeting?
I think it's altogether 10 lectures. So if we do one a week, it'll be 10 of these. 10 weeks.
David, I have a curiosity. This is right on what you're saying. This was titled 12, the last one, and 13, this one, which gave me the impression that there were 11 previous gatherings and 11 previous lectures, and is there somewhere to go to get the others? I'm just enthralled.
Yeah, we cut 1 through 11 are Nietzsche.
Oh, okay.
if we wanted to do that, maybe we'll go backtrack and do. I was doing it with a friend of mine. He's not here right now, but we were doing them one by one, the same we're doing now, and then we just ended Nietzsche 2 weeks ago, and so Heidegger was the next one, and I just decided to throw it open for everybody. So
Oh, you've just okay. You've explained it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
But they're all great. I recorded everything I ever took with Matt, and I've got them all. Yeah.
If I walk back, then I look at Nietzsche meetups that you'd had, and you'll have the posts on those that you can grab the lectures. I really enjoy it. Or I don't know.
You know what you can do in Meetup? You have a Meetup account, Charlie? You can go back through the group, ask for the past events, click on events, and then
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact. And if I look up the Nietzsche ones, then I'll see those attachments for the previous material. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
So,
if you have any problems,
yeah.
just contact me. I'll guide you through it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
But this will be a great series to go through. I mean, I'm learning a lot just by going through them again. So this is helping me consolidate the information.
Know that I have the most difficult time opening those lectures. I mean, I have to go to all these contortions on my desktop. And then after I listen to them, I can't shut them off. I mean, I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. I don't know why.
Sounds like a player issue with your player. They're WAV files on my Google Drive, and you just download them to your hard drive, and you should be able to play them with any player that plays a WAV.
That's what it says, music. I thought it was iTunes, but it's unclear what they're using.
If it can play a WAV file, then if it can play an MP3, it could probably play a WAV file.
Well, I play them. It's just I can't shut them off without closing my computer and doing all these. I mean, I just find it odd. That's all.
That must be a player issue. Yeah, I use VLC player. That's VLC player is a great player. Just use
it. It is good.
Yeah.
But you know what? Go ahead.
I'm just trying to get my bearings here since it's my second meeting here, I think. So is this, do you present to a small group of friends and then like put it up on Meetup for other people to join in into, or is this part of the Philadelphia Philosophy Society, or like where are we, thing?
No, I don't know what you're saying.
Are you in Seattle, David?
I'm in Southern California.
Southern California. Good.
Oh,
that's a good place to be.
And
as long as it's not burning. Yeah.
Is a really
no, that's way up north. Yeah. Thankfully. Yeah.
All right.
It's part of the Virtual Philosophy Network, right?
It is virtual now. I'm in Las Vegas.
Because what's been happening is since
I'm in Australia.
Will was asking, how you just go to the Virtual Philosophy Network and
the situation that's been happening is, of course, you can't meet in person anymore, so all the North American and beyond philosophy meetup groups have been merging together and posting each other's events, which I think is a great thing personally. So.
Yeah. I'm part of the what is it called? The Portland Philosophical Colloquium.
Yeah, right. They are combined now.
Portland.
Yeah.
Portland, Toronto, Chicago. It's like
Philadelphia.
About 32. 32 cities.
And just to let you guys know, Portland riots here are not as bad as the news tells you they are, really. It's unbelievable what I hear from people in New York. They call me up and say, what's going on? It's just not like that. I mean, I was part of I followed in my car and tooted the horns with the protesters, and it was just so peaceful and great. And then I hear all these things where everybody was killing one another and shooting. It's just, I don't know what they're showing. There's definitely problems with the police, but that's really late at night. And I really think it's people that the government is bringing in. I just don't see it as happening so much in Portland. So just tell your friends, if you don't live in Portland, that we're not, I mean, we're mostly a white little town here. Portland is a white city, and it's just a whole, I don't know, it's very interesting what's
The
going on.
Burnside location of Powell's has opened.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear that. And I just live a few blocks away. When, are you kidding? I'm really surprised that the owner came back. He said he wasn't going to do it for a while until the cases went down.
I received notification in my inbox.
Well, I belong to them. Now I'm starting to feel like I'm isolated. Never mind what I said about the Portland riots. I must be wrong.
As far as the virtual world, for anyone who hasn't seen it, I haven't dug through it yet myself, but and I think it's the Seattle group that put this up. There's something called the virtualphilosophy.network.com. That's just one word, virtualphilosophy.network.com. And it looks to be pulling together all these different philosophy groups. Again, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and there's groups from Hong Kong. There's groups, and it looks like somebody's put in the effort to really try to pull everything together, which is quite exciting.
It is exciting, but I've been finding the same, these same groups with if I go into Toronto meetup philosophy groups or the Portland ones. It seems like they're in touch with a lot of things. I mean, a lot of the different cities.
Yeah.
So-
So Virtual Philosophy Network is worth it. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Do you have to belong to that?
No.
No.
You're in it now.
Well, that's what I
Yeah,
like. Belonging to something without having to join.
Wait, so how I don't, maybe it's just late, but I'm a computer scientist and I don't understand how this works. So it says that I'm in the Philadelphia Philosophy Meetup, but you all claim to be from Australia, Los Angeles. Is it automatically
Because
combining?
they all merged with, they all gave their sites, I guess you could say. First of all, you have to expand your horizons as a computer person.
When you go to Meetup, you go down and extend your distance instead of finding groups within 50 miles. You just click the one that goes beyond 50 miles.
Or you can go to the
without any limit, yeah.
virtual.
Right, and then you'll find all the meetups, under philosophy. Yeah.
Huh.
Right. Or you can just or you just go to this site right here, Virtual Philosophy.
Okay. Wow.
Expanding your horizons.
Right.
Yeah.
Expand your horizons.
Right. Thanks.
Go beyond. Well, thank you guys. It's very nice, but I'm going.
Thank you very much, James.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, everyone.
Thanks to everyone. I'm leaving
Thanks,
as
David.
well. Thank you all.
Contact me if anybody wants like the full list of everything, and I'll send it out, or we'll just do it.
I don't know if it's a good idea even, because the questions are so good.
Yeah.
The questions that came up tonight were so spot on.
Okay.
So if that just continues, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
I love it.
We got 10 to go through, so this will be good. All right.
Thanks,
So
Dave.
next week,
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
probably tomorrow.
All right, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.